طيب بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين أما بعد. So we stopped last week. I don't know if you got to turn that up. That's loud enough? No. We stopped last week and we finished the Arkan al-Iman, the pillars of Iman. In the next lesson, which is on page 130, says the fourth lesson, categories of Tawheed and the categories of the Shirk. Aqsam al-Tawheed wa Aqsam al-Shirk. This is, as the fourth lesson is the last lesson in the section of the book that will cover Aqidah, that will cover the belief of the Muslim. Which will, after that, we'll go into the section dealing with al-fiqh, the conditions of the salat and stuff like that, and everything coming after that. But this is the last section of the book that has to do with Aqidah. And the previous section had to do with Aqidah, the belief, or the pillars of Iman, and also the Shahada, the meaning of the Shahada and all of that. All of that had to do was in the section of Aqidah. This is the last section that has to do with the section of Aqidah, which is a Tawheed, which is usually translated as the oneness of Allah, the oneness of Allah. And the Shaykh Rahimahullah, he starts off discussing, and some of this was already covered actually in the section about the Shahada, the three different categories of it, Tawheed. But this section is a little more detailed for some of it. Some of it is repetitive, but some of it is a little more detailed. So he says, firstly, if you have the English, the explanation starts on 131 at the bottom where it says explanation. I'm not going to read all that for the sake of time because a lot of it he's going to mention again in the explanation, so we don't have to read the same thing twice. He says that this lesson is connected to the three types of Tawheed, oneness of Allah, because a lot of times we use the word Tawheed, and some people don't know what Tawheed is. But for example, it says here, the fourth lesson is the categories of Tawheed, Tawhid, and the categories of Shirk, Shirk. Assuming that the English reader knows what Tawheed is and knows what Shirk is. If a person who picks up this book doesn't know what Tawheed is, right? Like a new Muslim, for example, somebody asked me, what's a good book for a new Muslim? Let me ask y'all, would y'all consider this a good book for a new Muslim? No? Yes? That's a book, Sheikh. He said yes or no. Would you consider this a good book for a new Muslim? He says no, he says yes. Anybody else? Yeah. It's opinion. It ain't no, this is opinionated question, y'all. For every Muslim. Every Muslim. Jade. The information, it's an opinion. The information in here is for every Muslim. The information in here is for every Muslim. That's why we wrote the book for every Muslim. My question to you is, do you think this is a good book for a new Muslim? That's all. It's an excellent book. The book is Jade. Me personally, I don't think for like a new Muslim that took Shahada yesterday. It's a new Muslim. What do you mean? Oh, that's a new Muslim. Yeah. He took Shahada yesterday, or she took Shahada yesterday. To me, in my opinion, this is not a good book for them unless somebody's going to walk them through it. To be sitting in the house reading it on their own, what are they supposed to do when they get to it and says the Shaykh? Shaykhh. You with me?
But it depends on how you look at it. Because it's an important lesson. So that in itself, we're forced them to ask questions like, okay, what's this, what's that?
Inshallah. No doubt. Depending on the person, no doubt. I ain't nothing wrong with it, but new Muslims are also on levels. Some people are ready for this because they've been around a lot of Muslims and they might like be familiar with a lot of stuff that we already say without knowing it. And some people might be like 0-0, right? Right.
That honestly can cause a few too, because you could be like, they might not know that he's talking about scholar. You might look at the book like, wait, my friend called his name shit, but my friend called his dad shit.
Everybody is shaking Philly.
Exactly.
And that's a whole nother problem. Everybody use the word shake and Philly. Everybody's saying sheikh. If we know what a sheikh really is, sheikh to us is slang, but in reality, sheikh has a meaning. Linguistically, a real meaning. It got a real meaning. He's still going. Yeah. Sheikh have a meaning. Sheikh have a meaning in age, or sheikh have a meaning knowledge. A person that got knowledge is a sheikh. Real literally, like Arabic language. But with the custom of people in the land of the Muslims, sometimes they consider religious people sheikh. They'll call you sheikh if they consider you to be a person that's practicing Islam, right? To them in that area. So the shuyukh are the people of knowledge, right? Scholars. Yes. On what? All right. No, I'm just saying, this is in case somebody pick up the book, right? A sheikh to some people is a person that's practicing deen. So if you go to, at least in Saudi, Mecca and Medina, in Mecca, I can only speak really Mecca and Medina, they'll consider you a sheikh because you got a beard, your thoba's not dragging, it's above your ankles, right? And you look like you're practicing Islam. So the people who consider you to be deenan, a good Muslim, they'll refer to you as a sheikh. Like a beard in the land of the Muslims, it means something. Like this, you on a whole nother, Islam is supposed to be on another level. And that's how people understand it. Everybody with me? The beard to us don't hold that much. Now you can have a beard and be, as we know, doing whatever you're doing, right? And there's no haya and respect for the lihya, right? So a person takes shahada, first they need to let their beard grow, and they might go right back to the corner, or she go right back to what she was doing, right? But the beard has a meaning. It symbolizes something in a certain culture. We don't know it's Islam. Islam, you're supposed to grow your beard. Cool. Depending on where you are, it's going to hold certain weight. I don't know where we're going with this because it ain't got nothing to do with this. I'm going to stop right there before we go too far. So here, point being, he starts off, rahimahullah, discussing that the tawheed that Allah created us for, he says, قَدْ دَلَّتْ نُصُوص الكتاب والسنة باستقراء والتتبع أنه ينقسم إلى أقسام ثلاث. How many categories of the tawheed? How many different types of Allah's oneness? That Allah is one, and what's famous is 3 different types of tawheed, 3 areas. We could break it down into 3 different things, as the ulama break it down. And he's going to get into that some scholars break it down into 2 different categories. None of them, no category, or all 3, they can't be separated. No matter how you look at it, it all comes back to the number of 3 separate categories. And we already did this, but he goes into a little more detail. He said that the text from the Quran and the Sunnah, as he says here, bil-istiqra' wa tatabbu'. All right, this is the question. Is there a dalil that says, is there an ayat that says these are the 3 categories of a tawheed? These are the three categories that deal with Allah's oneness. Does anybody know the ayah? Or hadith? Hmm. طيب. Where does it say? What does it say in that verse? The categories of Tawheed are three. Huh? Does it say it? طيب. There is no ayat or hadith that says there are three categories of Tawheed. Right? Clear? You're not going to pick up the Quran and some of you are going to come across a verse that says, as the Sheikh says here, the categories of Tawheed are broken into three. But it's done bistiqrat. That's why it says here, it says through investigation, it says at the bottom of 131. طيب, through investigation, which means al-istiqra is a form of, it comes in the books of usul al-fiqh, a form of dalil, a proof. And it is investigation, but it's a heavy investigation. Not just a, I'm going to use this because this is what we know. It's not a quick Google search and then you come up with something. Nah, that they got to sift through and they go through the Quran and the Sunnah. Heavy investigation. Okay, this is what the text point to. All of the texts point to these things. We have plenty of ayat, a hadith that show it's restricted to these three, right? Some may say, okay, it's restricted to these two, and they group them the way they group them, but it comes back to three separate categories. And that's why it says investigation through the Quran and the Sunnah. Those three are Tawheed al-Rububiyyah wa Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah wa Tawheed al-Asma wa Sifat. Tawheed of Allah's lordship, that He is the only Lord alone. Tawheed that Allah Jalla wa Ala is the only one to be worshipped, the only one worthy of worship. And Tawheed, the oneness in Allah's names and His attributes. He says these three cannot be separated. Meaning, a person can't just believe in Allah's oneness as far as Him being the Lord and the Creator, right? And then worship other than Allah, or worship Allah and worship other than Allah with Allah. That they all are connected and they can't be separated. Clear? He says here, belief iman al-abd bi rububiyyatillah wa asma'ihi tabaraka wa ta'ala wa sifatihi yastalzim an yukhlisa al-ibada kullaha lillah. If a person believes in the oneness of Allah's lordship, that Allah is the only Lord, He's the only creator, right? And everything that is going to get into when it comes to Allah's lordship, al-rububiyyah. If a person believes that and they believe in Allah's names and His attributes, right? That He is al-Basir, the all-seeing, as-Samir, the all-hearing, and Hakim, the all-wise. If a person believes all that, then it's mandates and it obligates the person. A person is obligated, knowing those two, that they have to worship only Allah. They can't know all of that. It's not allowed. You know all of this, and then you turn and worship something or someone from the creation. Clear? So yeah. He says some of the scholars, and he goes into an issue about some say that it's only two. And we'll read this just for the sake of majority, I think probably the majority of the books that we might be familiar with may usually say three. Is that correct? That's fair. Is that a fair assessment? So yeah. He says some of the people, the scholars, people of knowledge say that it's two categories. So the two categories, they break down basically. Right now we say there's how many categories? Three. Okay, they say it's two categories and they put the same three categories. They put two of them under one umbrella and one under the other umbrella. So it still comes out to be the same three categories. So yeah, what's the difference? They say two of those categories, the benefit in those two categories is knowledge. In the other category, the benefit is action. So we know the ayat that why were we created? For worship. Worship is action from us, right? Worship is an action that we have to do. It's action that we have to do. So yeah, if you're looking at the three categories of a tawheed, one category requires us to do action, which is tawheed al-uluhiyyah, the tawheed of worship. And the other two categories require knowledge from us, that we have to have knowledge of these things. And that's what he's talking about. I think that's at the top of page 132. They call it, I'm sorry, in the middle of 132. It says the Tawheed of knowledge and the Tawheed of action. It says 1 and 2 on the bottom of, or the middle of 132. So they call it Tawheed, number 1, ilmi, knowledge. And that is Tawheed al-Rububiyyah, that we have knowledge that what? There's only one Lord. There's only one creator, that we have knowledge of this. That Allah gives life, causes death. Allah is in control of everything, right? Allah alone. This is a form of Tawheed. Do we have to do anything necessarily as people? No. In this case, our job is to understand and have knowledge of this. Clear? The same thing with Allah when it comes to Allah's names and attributes, right? That is based on, as they say, knowledge. The matlub fihi al-ilm wal-ithbat. The benefit from those two things is that we have knowledge and we affirm those two categories. Yes, Allah is the only creator, alone. Yes, Allah is as-samir, the all-hearing, alone. Allah hears everything alone, and He doesn't need help. He doesn't get weak, and everything that Allah described Himself with. All of the names that Allah described Himself with, that they're strictly for Allah Jalla wa'ala. And the attributes the same, and they're perfect. And that's only for Allah Jalla wa'ala. And that category, those two things, those two categories, it only takes us to know, have the knowledge of it, and say, yes, Allah is as He described Himself in the Quran, or as the Prophet Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam described Himself, or described Allah in the Sunnah. Tayyib. And the third category, which is worship. And this is the category that they say takes action, right? And they call that Tawheed Amali. Tawheed Amali, that it actually takes action, which is the Tawheed of worship, Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, bi-ifrad Allah, bi-ifrad Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bil-ibadah, that a person singles Allah out alone and only worships Allah. And this takes us, this takes worship, this takes an action from us, the human being. So rather they say it's 3 categories or 2 categories, right? They all come back to 3. And those are the 3 we're going to discuss, inshallah. The famous ayat that is used that we know is from where? That every mankind is created for worship, right? That ayat is where? If we don't know, we're going to learn today. The purpose of our creation that most people know is in what surah? Huh? What's the ayat first? What's the verse? That, huh? And I did not create the jinn and humans, mankind, except that they should worship me. That's the purpose of the creation, which is in Surah Al-Dhariyat, ayat 56. This is on page 133. That's the famous verse that everybody knows, that I have not created the jinn and mankind except for worship. When it comes to the oneness of Allah and His lordship and in His names and attributes, or which is considered what? That we have knowledge of those things. On page 133 at the top is the other ayat, which is in Surah Talaq, right? Where Allah says, it is Allah who has created the 7 heavens and the earth, the like thereof, meaning the seven heavens, 7 earth. His command descends between the heavens and the earth, that you may know that Allah has power over all things, right? The point of the creation is to, not the point of the creation, but they say the point of the creation, the other point, is for the person to have knowledge. They say this ayat points to the direction of knowledge, and he's going to go into more detail. In order that you know that Allah has power over all things. Tell you again, regardless, whether it's majority of the books, it says 3 categories, right? You might pick up a book, and the only reason I mention it, this case, you pick up a book and it says Tawheed is 2 categories. So I thought he said 3, right? Whether it's 2, whether it's mentioned in the book 2 or it's mentioned in the book 3, they're all going to come back to the same 3. Clear? They're all going to come back to the same 3. That was the only point of mentioning the difference. So you got a question? So again, how do we know it's three categories? What's the dalil that is three categories? What's the verse that tells us it's three categories, or the verse that tells us it's two categories? Huh? Yeah, in the Quran. There is no verse that says that literally. When I say, y'all, there's no verse that literally says there are three categories. Clear? There is no verse that literally says there are two categories. So the question is now, well, how did they come up with this that it's three categories? Huh? Say, scholars. Let's use that. Let's start right there. Scholars. Scholars can just come up with anything? Yeah, right. Scholars did what? We gotta say, we can't just say the scholars. We can't scholars said that. They can come up, they can just come up and say stuff. They had to investigate. What did they investigate? The Quran and the Sunnah, as we say, with a fine-tooth comb, a heavy investigation. And once they do that, which is called an istiqra, and here it says investigation, that's how you translate it in the book. Investigation, a serious investigation, not a light, quick Google search. Right? It's books and books. So we don't know. There are more books of hadith than just Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. Okay, 6 books of hadith famous. And then there's other books of hadith that are lengthy. It's a lot of hadith. So yeah, we got the 6 books that are famous, and then just one book after that that's long as the Muslim of Imam Ahmed. By itself is, depending on the print, maybe 30 or 40 volumes by itself. And then there's other books of hadith. So they have to do a search. It's not just a quick, let me look this up. So it's a search, and they go, okay, the dalil that we found in the Quran and Sunnah, they come and they point to this. So yeah. No, that's not analytical deduction. That's qiyas. Analytical deduction is qiyas, which is another dalil. That's another type of dalil, because dalil is more than the Quran and the Sunnah. After the Quran and Sunnah, we have what also? Consensus, ijma of the scholars, and analytical deduction, qiyas. And these are the ones that the scholars agree. Then there's a whole nother section after that are under the chapter of dalil in Islam. But the scholars might all agree, not all agree on them, but many of them use them. And one of them is al-istiqra, which is translated investigation, as it says in the book. So if we say, how do you know that there are 3 categories for Allah's oneness? We say that the scholars have explained through investigation and heavy investigation and research, that the research in the ayat, the Quran and the Sunnah point to, that is 3. And some have come up with 2, but again, it all comes back to 3. طيب. This is why he says, عرفت بالاستقراء. He says, وهو حجة. هو حجة. Istiqra is considered to be a proof in Islam, and that comes in the books of Usul al-Fiqh. Usul al-Fiqh. طيب. He gives an example now, and inshallah this helps us in our salat. The example is for the 3 categories. That the first category is that Allah is one as the Lord and as the creator, right? The second category is that Allah is one, and the third category is what? That Allah is one when when it comes to our worship. We can't worship along with Allah, anyone or anything, right? طيب. He pulls an example now. This is an example of each category in the Quran. And this takes, you have to think, ponder. I didn't ask questions. I'm saying for the scholars to be able to pull this out and understand the ayat, it takes thinking. Like sometimes we just reading over stuff and without thinking about it. A lot of times when we say, how did that law come, or how did that rule, what makes it sunnah, what makes it haram, what makes it obligatory? right? It has to be pondered and looked at. And there's some things that are clear and some things take a little more thought. طيب. So he says that the three types of Tawheed are mentioned in Surah Al-Fatiha. Now again, right now we're just using the basic translation of the words. Allah's lordship, and it's just a point. This is right here. If I'm a new Muslim, I'm just saying. If I'm a new Muslim, it says number one, Tawheed, Tawhid, AR, Ar-Rububiyyah. If somebody took Shahada yesterday, the expectation is that you know what I'm saying? It might need to be a little more, some things, not that you can't put the Arabic, but you might want to put the English in there just to make sure anybody pick up the book and get a benefit from it. Because I remember reading the books, and if I didn't understand, it's discouraging. I might put the book down. I can't. And then they end up not reading the book at all. With all of the benefit in here, that could frustrate a person when they put it down and they don't continue the book. Tell you. So the three categories in Al-Fatiha. He says, number one, the first ayah in Surah Al-Fatiha, Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. All praise is due to the Lord of all that exists. He says this is an example of what? What category of Allah's oneness? Huh? All praise and thanks be to Allah, Lord of all that exists. Al-Rububiyyah, Allah's lordship. This ayah points to, and this is just one ayah, of course, because the book is summarized. This is just one verse from the Quran that points to Allah's lordship. Yes. Good question. Does this ayah point to the fact that we have to worship Allah alone? It says, all praise and thanks be to Allah, the Lord of all that exists. If it does, how? So, okay, all praise. I'm listening. How? If we say yes, how? Okay, so what does that mean? How does that? Uluhiyah, to worship. Uluhiyah. He already said Rububiyyah, so he asked, can that be a proof for Uluhiyah? Sheikh says yes. If we say yes, we need to be able to prove that it does, right? We want to, right? So my question is, if we say that, where does the worship part come in? Huh? Yeah, praise is action. Tell you. Well, that's what you got to say. You can't, when I ask you a question, right, you can't just read the ayah back to me. The ayah says, all praise and thanks be to Allah, Lord. You say, yeah, all praise is to Allah. You got to explain, okay, praise is an action, right? Praise, Al-Thamaraat Allah, is ibadah, is worship. That means you got to know what worship is. That's a whole nother conversation. But you know what I'm saying? You got to give some detail. Praise is an action, and all the praise, that ibadah, must be for Allah only. You with me? Just tell me the ayah back there. You know what I mean? Like the next verse, he says, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. Oh, I'm sorry, he says, Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, which is what category of Allah's oneness? Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin. Allah's names, Ar-Rahman is a name, Ar-Rahim, Malik Yawmiddin, all of these are two names and a sifat and a name, Malik Yawmiddin. Tayyib, for Allah's names and attributes. And then he says, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'een. If we understand the meaning of these words, when we recite Al-Fatiha, it should give us some more, it should give us some more focus in the salah. If we understand, okay, Alhamdulillah Rabbil Alameen, this proves that only Allah is the Lord. Right? That's pondering while you recite the ayah. Allah is the only Lord. All my worship has to be for Allah. Ar-Rahman Ar-Rahim. Allah is one in His names and attributes. Ar-Rahman. We need to know what the name Ar-Rahman is, even if we only know the translation. The name Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. Even if we only know the translation, it should give more meaning in our salah and give us more focus. Maliki Yawmiddin, right? The owner or the master of the day of judgment. And then the last one, Iyyaka na'budu wa iyyaka nasta'in. You alone we worship, and you alone we ask for help. Is the proof for what section? Worship. Worship. If we recite in the Quran and we recite in Al-Fatiha, which we don't have an option of reciting in the Salah, then these are the type of things that we should be trying to bring to our mind as we're reciting to give us more focus. Not just get through the Al-Fatiha right quick because I got to recite it. I'm in a rush. I got to get back to work. I got to get here. Store already closed. I got curfew tonight. We got to get in. All right? That if we reciting with this, it brings more meaning to the Salah. It brings more meaning to the Salah. And this is just a sidebar, if you understand Arabic, it brings even more meaning. I think I'm gonna say that every class as an encouragement, inshallah. If you understand Arabic, it gives more meaning if you understand what Allah is saying. It holds a little more weight. Sahih? For the people who understand Arabic, I think they would agree. And it's not that we can't learn Arabic. That's fake news. We black, we in America, we from Philly, it's rough, this, spitting out here, so we can't learn Arabic. That's the excuse. Trick from the shaitan to keep us ignorant of understanding the book as it was revealed, understanding the original text. We should take pride in having our original text. How many people that you know who don't believe in Allah and His Messenger have their original text as it was revealed? Alhamdulillah. Should take pride because Allah told us at the end of time, the Prophet told us at the end of time. Now he goes into more detail as it comes to the Tawheed of worship. Allah's oneness when it comes to, His lordship, Tawheed al-Rububiyyah. And I want to keep using the word lordship because a lot of times we use Arabic words and people don't even know what they don't know what they mean. It would have been better just to say it in English and know what it means than to just say it in Arabic and don't know what it means. Right? There's no condition that you have to say the word in Arabic for you to be right. As long as you understand the concept. Majority of the Muslim world are not Arabs. Right? The majority of the Muslim world are not Arabs, which means it's possible people recite the Quran and don't understand what they recite. It's possible, y'all. Because a person recites the Quran doesn't mean they understand what they're saying. Doesn't mean they understand, but that's the blessing in it only that people who don't understand Arabic at all memorize the Quran from front to back. And if you make a mistake, they'll correct you. If you ask them what it means, they might not know what it means. But Allah preserved the Quran. If you ask what it means, they might not know, but Allah preserved the Quran in the hearts of the Huffaz. Tayyib. So he says it is Iman billah subhanahu al-khaliq li kulli shay'in al-mutasarrif fi kulli shay'in la sharika lah fi dhalik. And this is the first type of tawheed. And this is the section that some of the non-Muslims, they might agree. Some Christians you talk to, they might agree it's only one God. We're not talking about who they worship. And we're not talking about, we ain't get there. We're talking about, they might say to you, yes, it's only one God. And some of them might say Jesus is not God. Some Christians might even argue, no, Jesus is not God. I don't believe that. They'll tell you that. I've met Christians who say they don't believe Jesus is God or the Son of God. It's not my belief. I'm just telling you what I was told, what they believe. Tell you, this will fall under the Tawheed of Allah's lordship, right? There's only one creator, right? There's only one that can give life or take life, right? He has no partner in that. No one helps with the creation. Allah creates alone. Allah creates alone. And all of those actions that are actions of Allah Jalla wa Ala. He gives life, calls death. Allah is in control of everything. Therefore, if we understand that Allah is in control of everything, then we understand it should give us a good understanding, or it should refer us or remind us of the qadr that we did last week, that the decree, nothing escapes Allah's knowledge. We're not people of luck. We're not people who consider you lucky. It was luck. It was only off of luck. Or, you know, other superstitious beliefs. People have superstitious beliefs with them, not us. We're not people of superstition. We're not people of luck. We're people who believe in the qadr. And everything we spoke about in the qadr, that everything is calculated, everything is written, and Allah knows, and nothing escapes Allah's knowledge. And everything has a wisdom and hikmah in it. Everything happens for a reason. Does it necessitate that I understand every reason for something to happen? It doesn't necessitate that we understand everything. What we do understand is that, as many non-Muslims will agree, many, as they say, Allah doesn't make mistakes, right? They'll agree. They'll agree. God don't make mistakes, right? So some things we will agree in. It'll be agreement, but you got to pay attention. Where does that fall? That agreement falls under the section of lordship, right? And he says here that this is not enough. This is not enough. To only believe that there's one creator is not enough for a person to be a Muslim. Everybody hear me? For a person, they say it's only one creator, one God. That God makes the sun come up and the moon go down, has turns the earth to spin, gives life, causes death. He's in control of everything. If a person believes that and they stop there, it's not enough for them to be a Muslim. Why? And he says specifically here, وَلَا يُنْجِي مِنْ عَذَابِ اللَّهِ. And it doesn't save them. That belief alone is not going to save them from the punishment of Allah Yawm al-Qiyamah, on the Day of Judgment. Right? But they have to come with the other categories. Why? Why is that not enough, y'all? Why is it not enough for a person to be a Muslim just to say that, just to believe there's only one creator? Tayyib. More than that. He said, because they have to believe the Prophet is the last messenger? Jid. Huh?
Yeah, separate ourselves from too far of a Muslim. Meaning that we can almost be a lot. So that we don't everybody else.
Salat is an action. Stay with the belief. A person believes that there's only one creator, only one God gives life and causes death. One God is in control of everything. He makes it rain, it makes it snow, makes the seasons change, makes the earth spin on the axis. You believe the person you're talking to, they believe all of that. It's not enough for them to be a Muslim.
Alone is not enough to believe in all of the person can easily take a different name of person. You can say, well, this person is this, or this person is that. Like how people say, how some old people say, God is this, God is something.
But here, it's easy. Inshallah, it's easy. Worship. If a person says, yes, there's one creator, and then they turn around and worship the sun, how can they be a Muslim? They turn around and worship their ancestors. How can they be a Muslim? They can believe all of that. There's one God, there's one creator. We agree on all of that, and then they turn around and they worship Jesus, right? And they themselves don't consider themselves to be Muslims, right? Even though they might agree in this area that we're talking about now. We might sit there and have a whole conversation and agree, yes, about the actions of our Lord, right? And even the names and attributes, right? But as he says, that wouldn't be enough to save a person from the hellfire, but it's a must that they also implement that in their worship also. That they worship only that creator, only. Tayyib. He says, this is why Allah said in Surah Yusuf, ayah 106, which is on page 136 in the middle of the page, where Allah said about the kuffar and mushrikeen, the disbelievers who, do we know what a mushrik is? A mushrik in Arabic. It says here, and for this reason, it says, Allah said about the disbelievers and the polytheists, a mushrik. Jay, what does that mean? Associate partners with Allah. I hear y'all. I don't know nothing, y'all. I'm starting from scratch. What is a polytheist, or what does it mean to associate partners with Allah? To worship something alongside Allah. Do they worship Allah? Huh? Okay, I'm not. Do they worship Allah? A mushrik. Does the mushrik worship Allah? He can. But the problem with the mushrik is that what? He also worships other things. That's a problem. Some people don't worship Allah at all. Some people who don't, who, if you use the word in English, if you use the word disbeliever, a person disbelieves Allah and disbelieves in the Messenger. So yeah, they're not all the same. All of the disbelievers are not the same. That's why some of their meat is permissible to eat, and some of their meat, y'all, is not permissible to eat. Some of their women is permissible for us to marry. We can marry some of their women, even though they're not Muslims. And some of their women, we're not allowed to marry. They're not all the same. So yeah, some of the disbelievers, they worship Allah, but they'll worship something else too. Clear? That's the mushrik, that they've made a partnership. They don't just worship Allah alone, they worship something else along with Allah. So Allah said about that type in Surah Yusuf, He said, وَمَا يُؤْمِنُ أَكْثَرُهُمْ بِاللَّهِ إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. Right? Meaning, he says here, يُؤْمِنُونَ كَمَا قَالَ ابن عباس رضي الله عنهما وغيره. يُؤْمِنُونَ بِاللَّهِ رَبًّا. That they believe in Allah, that He is the Lord, the Creator, the Provider. They believe that. Right? Who are they talking? Who is Allah talking about? The mushrik, the one who worships Allah and he worships something else. Some people worship dead people. Y'all, it might sound however you think it sounds, but some people worship dead people. Ancestor worship, whatever you want to call it, or whatever else it is that they worship. Allah said you'll find that that they do. They believe in Allah and His Lordship. And then He said at the end of the ayat, إِلَّا وَهُمْ مُشْرِكُونَ. That also they will worship something else. They don't have a problem with that. They don't have a problem worshiping Allah and worshiping something else with Allah. This is the mushrik. This is the one who put partners, or as it usually says in the book, it says associating partners with Allah, right? That they might worship Allah and they might worship something else also. This is the mushrik. How do we know? He says, because this type of person, إِذَا سُئِلُوا مَنْ خَلَقَكُمْ. If you ever have conversations with Christians, a conversation with a Christian, y'all don't got to be an argument all the time. Sometimes it could be just a, discussion, right? It could be a discussion. Who created you? Who's the creator? Maybe sometimes, because this happens a lot. Sometimes, many times, a lot of Christians don't understand what we believe. So when we talk to them and have a discussion, it don't gotta be, man, y'all on falsehood. Y'all on a bunch of falsehood. And then tear them down. They don't want to hear nothing you gotta say after that. It could be a discussion. Well, who's the creator? Because we believe that it's only one creator. We don't gotta use a bunch of Arabic terms when we talking to people who don't understand Arabic. Who's the creator? It's only one creator. We believe it's only one creator. Do y'all believe? Oh, y'all believe it's one creator? Because a lot of times they don't understand what we believe. We assume that people understand, but they might not understand what we believe. But that's why it says, if you ask them, "Man khalaqakum," who created you? Who created the heavens? Who created the heavens and the earth? They might agree. A lot of times they don't. But this is good conversation because it make them, at least, as we say, get the wheels turning, make them think, right? Who wakes you up every day? They say God. Do they have to say Allah? These people who don't believe in Allah's messenger. They say God wakes me up every day. Thank God. Right? Now who they talking about? We got to get to that. All right. Who gives death? Who gives birth and all that kind of stuff. In these areas, a lot of them, I'm not saying all of them, but many people will agree. Even if they're not Muslim, they'll say God, it's only one God. Right? So in this case, we might agree in this section of it Tawheed, in Allah's oneness. Yeah, yes, there's one Lord and he does all this, and they might agree with us. Right? This is not enough though. And they themselves will not consider themselves Muslims based on that. A Christian who believes that will not consider themselves a Muslim based on that, even though we agree. They're not going to say, oh, well, I'm a Muslim. Oh, y'all believe that too? Oh, well, I'm a Muslim. Right? They're not going to do that. So how does the Muslim do that? So you really a Muslim? You believe it's only one God? Or you really a Muslim? It takes more than that. Right? It takes a little more than that. And that's why Allah said about the mushrik that they worship Allah and they worship other than Allah, along with Allah. And that's not a person who can be considered a Muslim, because the Muslim, right, has to worship Allah alone with no exceptions. There are no exceptions where we have the exception we can worship other than Allah at no place in time. There's no exception where we're allowed to worship other than Allah ever. And this is a Tawheed al-Uluhiyyah, which you didn't get to, which is kind of long, so we probably want to do that next week, inshallah ta'ala, the second section. That one's kind of long. Any questions before we stop? Yes. Lastly, before we stop, is a discussion of, a lot of times, y'all, we need to be careful about the terms we use. We don't have to use it. We don't know Arabic, it's fine. Not like that. Not it's fine like you shouldn't learn Arabic. It's fine like you don't have to force people, like just use the term, especially when we're talking people who don't understand what we understand. Use stuff so that they understand what we're talking about. It's fine. You're telling somebody about uluhiyyah and rububiyyah, they looking like, what's that? Right? Just give it to them simple and plain, because the people that we're talking to, or the people that we live around, or the people that we work with, also they're on different levels. Everybody's not on the same levels. Not all of the people that we're talking to who don't believe are the same. They don't all have the same belief. So we don't want to talk to them assuming we know what they believe. They might believe what we believe, and they don't know it because they don't know our belief.
A lot of students find it like problematic when other people that wasn't Muslim other students use the word God, because they feel like it's taken away, like you're trying to come down. I can't think of the word, but is it problematic to use God?
I don't know. I mean, I'll say this. We're Muslim and we know Allah's names and his attributes. If you're talking to a person who doesn't understand that language, my question is, what's the alternative? That would be my question. I don't really know the issue that they're talking. They saying they saying you can't call Allah God. Allah. I mean, if the expectation is the person listening knows who Allah is. I mean, realistically, if you're talking to a person and you're giving them dawah and you're telling about what you believe, if we assume that people know what we believe, like the dawah, it's a mistake from the beginning. Some people, y'all, don't know who Allah is. They don't know. They might have heard the name, but they don't know that. They don't know what we believe. Some people think we worship Muhammad. So my question would be, if we're not going to say Allah, or we're going to say Allah and explain it, or we're going to say we're just going to start talking. Now, if we want to start and set the ground rules for the conversation and say, well, I believe we can't even say God, or what? I mean, I want to tell the person, well, I believe God's name is Allah. Like, I don't refer to him as God. I say Allah. So if I keep saying Allah, I'm referring to what you call God. You want to do that? I mean, if you want to do that, that's fine. But I mean, I think that needs to be like established in the conversation. We can't just assume that people looking at us because it's Philly, especially here. It's Philly. It's a bunch of Muslims walking around. People look like Muslims. You can see Islam everywhere. You can't assume that everybody understands everything, because they don't. A lot of people think, a lot of Muslims think, a lot of non-Muslims, y'all don't even know the difference between the nation and Islam. So some people don't think the nation and Islam, they think it's the same thing. They think what we believe, what the nation of Islam believes is the same. The older people, yeah, because that's what they experience. The older people, older generation, 70s and 60s and 60s and 70s and up, what they experienced, a big portion of it was the nation of Islam. And that's what their understanding of Islam might be to this day. They might not know anything outside of that. So we go to them talking, and you work with a person, or you see a person every day at the Dunkin' Donuts, and they start asking you about Islam, and you're assuming that they understand everything you understand. You're assuming that all these Muslims walking around, you gotta know something. Nah, people, they may not be in those type of circles. So if a person want to start the conversation and lay that groundwork and not use that, that's one thing. As far as realistically, I'm just trying to figure out what you're going to say to a person. Because when you use terms that people don't understand, it could be a turnoff. It could be a turnoff. I don't know what you're talking about. You keep saying these words like now, like, who you trying to play me? I don't know what you're saying. I don't know what you're saying. You gotta, what are you talking about? Like, what does that mean? And that's assuming the person's gonna ask you what it means. You know how we are. Some people don't want to ask questions. They shy to ask. They don't want to look like they don't know something. So they might not ask. So you didn't tell them and they didn't ask. Y'all had a whole 3-hour conversation and they never knew who Allah was because you refused to say God. I don't know if there's a prohibition on saying God. Allah Allah. Sheikh, you know any prohibitions on saying God? You shaky. I'm talking to you. Allah Allah. No doubt. Speak to the language, speak to the people in the language they understand. Mumtaz. Jade. We assume, like I said, you get to the point where they get comfortable and then you tell them, you know, God has names, right? They might not know that Allah has names. Shake. Right? They might not know that Allah has names. Allah has names that He told us. How do you know about these names? Well, Allah told us His names in our book, the Quran. He told us His names. So He told y'all His names? Yeah, He gave us the name. We don't have to make up names. We don't have to make up anything about Allah because He already described Himself to us. So we don't have to make up anything. We don't have to shoot from the hip on anything. We don't have to get creative. All we have to do is read. Right?
My question will be, and this is just, I guess, my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, but I guess if you go to the origins of Allah's name linguistically, right?
Uh-huh.
And Arabic, it came from Al-Ilah, right?
Allah, the name Allah, yeah.
So, I mean, then it's up to me, kind of learns to the fact that it shouldn't be problematic because it's God. So, in essence, right?
I mean, it's a translation. I really try not to get caught up in translations, but because now it all depends on. Yeah, don't like people using the word God. I mean, how you want to translate Al-Ilah? If you get into the Arabic definition of Al-Ilah and the meaning of it, and then you're talking to people, how you have to be able to express that to them. Whatever it says in the Arabic that you're talking about, when you turn around and talk to a person in their language, whether it's English or Spanish or whatever it is, you have to be able to express what's in Arabic to the person. What are you gonna say it in Arabic to them and make them? You know what I'm saying? So my point is this: what is Ilah? What does that point to in the English language? Yeah, amongst Muslims, he's saying that some Muslims have a problem with people using the word God. So the thing is, what are you gonna say to make the person listen and understand? You know what I'm saying? The asl of the word Al-Ilah, Allah's name, is an Arabic term. The word is Arabic. So now, how do you express the meaning of that word that's in Arabic, and the meaning is in Arabic? How do you express that in English to a person to at least give them an understanding of what we're talking about? And that's why people use the word God. That's probably the closest. Now, if you want to make an exception and then go into detail and all that, like you said, then that's something that can be done. I don't know of any prohibition on using the word God, though. Allah, I don't know about all that. God with a capital G and God with a lowercase d. I don't know. The lowercase g. Allah.
I think we were saying that. Like that was my argument in affirmative. What you're saying, like that's why.
One thing, what's important is to use the Islamic uh, how do you say it? You have to use the Islamic definition of things, not the English definition of things. You understand what I'm saying? The Quran is in Arabic. So when we talk about Islam and rulings, the asl is that it's coming from the Arabic language, right? Islam, Sharia, is coming from the Quran and the Sunnah. The Quran is in Arabic. So now we have to figure out, okay, if we don't know Arabic, how do we get the point across, or how do we make the people understand what it says in Arabic and English? You have to translate it. Okay. The problem with translations is some things can't be translated exactly. So now you have to do what? Make it, you have to make it understandable in that language without changing the meaning of the original thing. You see the job of the translator? That's why the translator, whoever the translator is, to whatever language it is, has a heavy responsibility, because you have to keep the meaning of what was said, but you have to make it understandable to the, is that a word? Understandable. You have to make it to the point where the person listening can understand whatever language they use, not just English. Whatever language is being used, being translated into, you have to keep the meaning. It might not mean you might have to do it verbatim, because if you do it verbatim, if I translate something exactly how it's from Arabic to English, and I say it might not make no sense. So not that I'm changing the meaning, but I have to make it make sense and still keep the meaning at the same time.
Question. What do you say of those who say they are actually in Aqidah?
What do we say to those that say they are actually in Aqidah? I don't know. What are we supposed to say?
That's what I'm thinking.
We're not studying the Aqidah of the Ash'aris in here. So that's going to need a detailed explanation that we're not getting to. We're not Ash'ari.
How do you come back and propose of it?
How do you come back into the fold of Islam when you what?
You haven't been as close to the deen as much as you want.
When you haven't been as close to the deen as much as you want to. We have to use what Allah and His Messenger gave us. We have to pray. We have to make dua. We have to be around people that are stronger than us Islamically. We have to be in those places that we know, and everybody know. We don't gotta act crazy. Everybody know. When you're not deening, you go certain places, and when you are deening, you don't go to them places. All right. When you really trying to get on your joint, as we say, I ain't going down. Trying to get on. I ain't gonna be trying. I gotta stay away from that. If we don't know where we're not supposed to go, then one place we all need to know where we should be going is the masjid, for sure. If we don't know that, if we don't know where we're not supposed to go, we need to come to the masjid, the masajid. Go to the masjid and start making friends in the masjid, meeting people and praying. Make sure we're praying. If we don't know how to pray, go to the masjid. Because it's a bunch of places, it's a bunch of things that we're not supposed to do. But let's keep it simple, because we'd be here all night. There's a bunch of things we are supposed to do. We'd be here all night. One thing we know, go to the masjid. Go where the people are worshiping Allah. Go where the people are, where you're going to run into somebody who you see to be stronger than you as a Muslim, that's going to encourage you to do better. That you could possibly ask them a question. Sitting home on the internet, y'all, that ain't the way. The jama'ah is the jama'ah, meaning we all come together physically, right, and do things. And that's why so many people took a hit during the pandemic. So many people got jammed and took a hit on their Islam, and a lot of us still haven't recovered, still haven't made it back to the masajid. Why? Because there was no jama'ah. There was nothing bringing us together and seeing people that's better, and we human. Some things we don't want other people to see. The Prophet told us in the hadith that the sin is the thing that you don't want people to see. So it's normal. We don't want people to see us like that. So when we see each other on a constant basis, it's an encouragement of not to do something, because at the least I don't want nobody seeing me like that. Let me try to stay in a good light, right? Which is no problem with that. We should want to have good reputations.
How do you as a Muslim interact with your family and having ignorant things they say?
How do you interact with your family? They're ignorant towards you because you're a Muslim, and they've been ignorant for over 10 years. You read the seerah of the Prophet, read the Prophet's life that he dealt with it. We're not dealing with nothing new, y'all. People were ignorant towards the Prophet, his own family members. We're Muslims. We behave and we get our direction from the Quran and the Sunnah, right? We be patient. Because they ignorant, don't mean we gotta be ignorant. It don't mean we gotta get trampled all over either. But they don't mean we have to, as we say, stoop to somebody's level and be disrespectful and ignorant. But at the same time, we don't have to let them walk all over us and totally disrespect us. But we need to know our Islamic boundaries. That shit, I wasn't finished. No, I'm gonna so go ahead. Stuff a sweatshirt. Yeah, this one got to come down to the center, man. Naeem got it. Like what? Naeem got him down to the center, inshallah. Tell you. That's it.
Where did you live in a period where there's nothing but good out in the masjid, in the local masjid? You live in the don't pay the meaning to get to the masjid.
If you live in a masjid, there's only bid'ah in the masjid.
But the local masjid is not
Astaghfirullah. Yeah. You just reading the question. How do you get? It's assumption. All right, this is assuming the person knows what a bid'ah is. Now the next question is because it's a person because they practice bid'ah. Like what is that? You can't pray behind them. What kind of bid'ah they on? They bid'ah. They not Muslim no more. They bid'ah. We talking right now, y'all. This is what I'm talking about. Right now we talking as if everybody watching or everybody listening knows what bid'ah is. You dig what I'm saying? But for the questioner, you have to understand bid'ah, number one, and the levels of innovation. Number two, and what is the bid'ah, number three, or you just heard it from somebody, or even if you're sure that it's innovation, either A, it's real easy, y'all. Either A, they're practicing innovation and they're still Muslims, or B, they're practicing innovations and they're not Muslims. The people of the Sunnah, Ahl Sunnah, if they're practicing innovation and they're still Muslims, meaning what they're doing doesn't take them outside of Islam, you can pray behind them. You go pray and go mind your business. If they're practicing innovation and it takes them outside of Islam, then that means what? You can't pray behind a non-Muslim. So if that's the case, you don't go there.
I think you just described
Like, it don't make a difference. You only got two options. The people on innovation and they're still Muslims. Oh my God. Khalas. Either they're practicing something they're not supposed to be practicing and they're still Muslims, or they're practicing something they're not supposed to be practicing and they're not Muslim anymore. If they're Muslims, it's permissible to go pray behind them. And if they're not Muslims, it's not permissible to pray salat behind somebody who's not a Muslim. And we'll stop there with sallallahu alaihi wasallam. We're not getting into that, man. I'll let you deal with that, inshallah. What an ikhwani is. They start going, what's the ikhwani and all that. Khalas. Sallallahu alaihi wasallam.